All right, my friends, I'm back. I know you're on pins and needles, and so am I, but I had to do a lot of work off camera. As soon as you decide and really step out, do you notice in faith, you just step out, I'm going to do this, everything went wrong. And then I kept looking at my sweater, and I kept thinking, this was just seemed like my sweater was off or something. For me. And, I went through, our first step was to pick a needle. Well, I gave you three sizes, but I hope everyone will stick with the number 8 or number 9 because I did not have time to try to do number 7, which would use number 3 on. It would just take too long, too many stitches. The whole formula would have to be different. And I had to come back so we can get on with this. So if you pick number 8 and all the needles in number 8, or number 9 and all the needles in that size, then we're ready to go in a number 4 weight yarn. All right. Now, then after you was to pick a needle, then of course the appropriate yarn. Then the last and most important thing is, the gauge, the size. It says find your numbers. Okay, I'm going to bring this back. This was just a little sample of when I walked you through how to do the gauge or how to do the counting system. The gauge was just simply when you take a ruler or the gauge tape and then you just find out how many stitches you have to the inch. Now that's the way most people do it, but then I didn't have, like I said, when I started I didn't have all that information. So I did the counting system where I finally just made a tape, which you do not have to have a tape this long, but I made a tape so that I could always count. I could lay this from one side across my bed to now I can do it to the center of my belly button. And every time I use my tape, compare it to the gauge, just simply by how many stitches times the inches and all of that, it always comes up more on the gauge. And so my sweater just kept looking larger and larger. The more I knit, I thought, man, this is all. So I stopped, pulled out a lot, and then I went back and used my tape and laid it across, the area I want to count. And then I was already over at least 4 or almost 5 stitches, at least 4 stitches more than what I needed, than if I had just sit here and counted, marked what I wanted to measure, and then counted every stitch, just like this. So that's fine. So check your gauge before we start. Check your number again. This is just writing on paper. It's a whole lot simpler. If this is not good on the paper, we just ball it up, throw it away, and then you get another sheet of paper. But once you get to knitting, like I'm going to share with you, like we're going to start, so check it again. You did your measuring tape and you did your stitches, and the main thing was to round that number up to a number, not round it up just by 4, but to the next number divisible by 4. So whatever that number is, right here I didn't need but 2 more stitches to get to 76. I rounded that up. All right, so now we are up to part 2 of this tape. Part 2 of this tape, and now we are at, let's see, we are at step 4. Step 4. And on step 4, we need to just pick a stitch, so that we'll pick a stitch, then we can make a formula. After you have checked your gauge one more time, either do it by the, like I said, the measuring tape, the ruler, or if you want to try counting your stitches so that you will get a better fit or nicer fit, because you want be able to use this same number over and over. You don't want to have to do this as long as you stay in the range of the needles and the yarn. You don't have to do this every time as we get ready to knit more sweaters. All right, but now we want to pick a stitch. This is a book that I reviewed. I just picked up this book. It was a book that I reviewed, and I thought, well, we'll just take a stitch out of here. This is a very common stitch. You can find it anywhere. I'm just trying to get in some of the books that I have. And a lot of stitch books I have not even reviewed yet. I just need to try to remember to use them and show them to you and just do a review. So this was the little cable knitting, and this was by Lynn Waterson. I did a whole review on it. But in the book, I just turned to one of the first stitches. I didn't even try to find anything, really advanced, because something that's simple to me may not be simple to the people that are going to step out and, take it step by step and try to knit maybe their first sweater or getting into knitting. So I have revamped the sweater. I have revamped my numbers so that my sweater would look even better. But I have tried to make the sweater, the name of the series is Simple Steps. And my steps had gotten so complicated by the time I was, working on the sweater, getting it ready. I thought, this is not, I need to just revamp, take it down a notch, and just remember, people that are just getting into it, make it simple steps for a simple sweater. So the stitch that I'm going to use, one of them we're going to use 2 stitches. One of them just going to teach you. And then this is called a mock cable or slip stitch cable. And it's just very simple. And you don't even need a cable needle. It's like a faux cable. But it makes a nice little edging on a sweater. It makes a nice little front panel, little edging. And you get the sense of when someone looks at your sweater, they're not going to believe it looks like you've done a whole lot of work when it was really easy. Simple steps for a simple sweater. So if you have this book, I just wanted you to know, but you can get this stitch anywhere. I know this stitch by heart. But since I had reviewed the book, I wanted to show you how to use the stitch. Oh, and by the way, it's only 4 rows. It's a 4-row repeat. 5 stitches, a multiple of 5 plus 2. I'm sorry my voice is so, I guess because it's rainy and really cold outside. And it's late at night. Alright, so pick a stitch, and now we're going to talk about a formula so that we can get ready to cast on. Alright, so because I wanted to come up with a formula that I can use for more than one needle size, I didn't want to have 2 or 3 formulas. That's why I'm hoping that you went with a US 8 or 9. 8 or 9. I'll put /8. Alright, I'm using the 9 because I'm fluffy. Anybody in the X sizes should be on a number 9 because it gives you a nicer drape for our body size. If you are a smaller size, like small, medium, large, 8 is a firmer fabric and you might like that. Alright, that's the only reason. Now, let's look at this formula. Alright, or schematic. Let's see if I'm close enough. I can hold it up. I'll just do that. I'll hold it up. Alright, on this schematic, this represents the cast on stitches. This long line represents the cast on stitches. And since, I don't do written patterns, this is how I work. I work from what I call a working formula. And on this this row of stitches right here down the center, and my new number, the number I'm going back to, is 100. When I did the gauge, it took me over 100, but it kept looking large. When I sat down and counted, just like I just explained, I came down to like 97, 98, and so I rounded it up to 100. And I believe that's going to fit me better. But now I can just slice up this line, these stitches, into whatever proportion of stitches I want. So, everyone, everywhere, let me share with you the schematic for this mock cable sweater. Mock cable and lace sweater. Alright, the first thing that I'm going to give you, I'm giving you this. Right in the center of this line, or in the center front panel of the sweater, on the original that you saw in the pictures, I did a really large lace section. But that was just going to be too much for a beginner, I'm telling you. So I brought it down to 16 stitches. So every one, every size, everywhere, for the lace, you will get 16 stitches for the lace that goes right in the center of the front of the sweater, front panel. Does that make sense? Okay, now, out of the stitch book, the cable was a multiple of 5 plus 2, so I'm just going to do 2 repeats on each side of the lace. 5 times 2 is 10, plus 2 equals 12. So I'm going to have on this side of the lace 12 stitches, and on this side of the lace 12 stitches. All right, whatever your total number of your cast on, whatever total number you cast on that's been rounded up to a number divisible by 4, you will add 16 and 12 and 12, and it comes out to be 40. I hope I did it right. I believe that's going to be 40 stitches, where you take 40 stitches, okay, from this number. Whatever your total number of cast on, you will take 40 stitches from that. I have a total of 30 stitches for, well, it was 60, and I have to divide the 60 in half to put 30 on this side and 30 on this side for stockinette stitches. Does that make sense? Can you see this simple, sorry if I tilted, simple schematic of how I simply I take my cast on number of stitches and I decide where I want to put what. Everyone is the same here, and then whatever stitches left over after you add this, this, and this, that number that's left over, I had 60, so I divided 60 and put 30 here and 30 there. Does that make sense? Then you go back, I always double check, then you add up all the numbers across and see if you come back to the original number, whatever the number was here. See if once you add all the numbers up, make sure you come back, and you're good to go. The only last thing is that we will add, to do the ribbing, I need to take this to do the 1x1 ribbing. I have to add a plus 1. So I have 100 plus 1. So I cast on, for me, my number now after counting, and I'm so glad I did, is 101. 101 stitches. Does that make sense? We'll add that 1 so that we can start our ribbing. All right, now let's see, make sure that I'm up to speed on what we need to do. That was pick a stitch, which I picked it out of the book. We have made our working formula. This will work for every size everywhere. The only numbers that would be different are these 2 numbers on the ends, because I don't know what your total number turned out to be. Now, we just need to cast on, and let's start at the bottom of the sweater. Back in just a minute. Alright, so now I'm back, and we are ready to start. Well, we need to cast on. First of all, I'm going to do the long tail cast on, because that's what I'm used to, but you can do, of course, we're going to have all degree of knitters following this little series. So you do whatever, you just do whatever you're used to, and you have your stitch count to cast on. Just do that. For those that are still new, I'm going to take just a minute or two, and as you can see, I've started to cast on. I'm using the number 9. Whether it's I hope you found a number 9, 36 or 40 or even a 48, just enough to accommodate all the stitches we're going to put on here. Does that make sense? All right, so in order to do that, let's see. Now, if you notice, I usually add just one of these little metal or little double-pointed needles. I get them usually at some little discount store or Walmart or the Dollar Tree or somewhere. Whenever I see them, I just buy them. They're very useful. But if I stick them, sometimes some knitters stick the other needle under, but that is too large for me to work with. So I just take one of these little double-pointed needles. I hold it up under my needle, and then I do the long tail cast on. That's where you have, here's the yarn that I'm using, and here's the yarn that comes from the ball, the working yarn. All right, so I simply make a V. I take my fingers and I separate the yarn and make a V. See that V? And then I go up under the thumb, across to the other side, and pull it through, and then onto the needle. Again, it starts with a V. I go up under the thumb, across, and just one until I have enough stitches for me to stop and count to see if I have my number. All right, now I'm gonna, even like I said, I'm a seasoned knitter, but even I need help, or I have some particular sites that I like to go to for information or to help on certain stitches. And I have several, but this one I'm going to link on all of this video, all of the tutorial that I'm going to do on this sweater series. I'm going to link, put a link down to Michelle Hunter. Her name is Michelle Hunter, and her site is called simply Knit Purl Hunter. Knit Purl Hunter. And I'm telling you, she is so precise and her demonstrations are so clean. Sometimes you just need to see someone else do something, or, just to, it just helps. Sometimes a person can do it a certain way and you go, oh yeah. So I'm going to make sure I link that down, and that will be anytime we're doing a stitch and I do a stitch or share with you a stitch and you need help on it more than maybe what I'm demonstrating or whatever. That is the site to go to. And I'm going to give you a category link because it's all linked in categories. It's very nice, and she is so precise and to the point and so clean, and her swatches and examples that she works on are just great. So I'll put that down. But anyway, that's just a simple long tail cast on. I'm going to cast on my 100 stitches plus the 1. Remember, everyone has to put the 1 because we're going to do a 1x1 ribbing. Now, I'm starting with the back of the sweater. First, I was going to start with the front, and then I thought, no, because first of all, if you haven't knitted in a while, or you just need to get into the rhythm of it, and so it's a lot easier to start on the back of the sweater. And then when you go, by the time you go to the front, not only do you have the rhythm of knitting down, you know kind of how to hold your needles again. All of that comes with just practice, people. There's no way to teach. It just comes with practice. You'll figure out how to hold the yarn, which is best. I do not knit continental, so I don't know anything about that, but you just do knit in any form that you like. Cast on in any form. But I will put her link for, those that are new or have no one to really follow, far as stitches and just plain great information. And how-to, great video she has. All right, so this is the back of the sweater. So now I'm going to go ahead and off camera finish casting on the long tail. Then I will stop and count twice. Always stop and make sure you count twice so that you do have the right number of stitches on your needle. Does that make sense? All right, I think that's all I need to do for this. I'll be right back. I'll finish off camera, count twice, and be back. All right, I have counted twice. I have my 101 stitches on to start my back, the back piece of the sweater. We're knitting this sweater in 2 pieces because it just makes a better learning process to see it in 2 pieces. The back, I'm going to, for the first few sweaters that we do, I will leave the back plain. And that's so that you can get used to it, improve your tension. The back will be, just mainly straight stockinette. this way you can get your tension and, get it nice and smooth. You can get into the rhythm of knitting. The rhythm is going to get you. Look, Gloria Estefan. Okay, so once the rhythm gets you, I figure after, a few inches or so on the back, then we will stop and go to the front and then get into the real meat of the stitch and the lace and everything that we're going to do for the front. But this is a good way, and like I said, just to kind of get you into the flow, I'm going to start you on the back. All right, now as you can see, I have all the stitches on my needle. We're just knitting flat, back and forth, back and forth. All right, this first row right here, you see that row that I have on the needle? This is just something, nobody told me this. I just started doing it. I just thought that was just by looking at it, I call this a wrong side row because I would see those little bumps from way long time from when I started knitting. I saw those little bumps, so I just assumed that was a wrong side row. So in order for me to start my 1x1 ribbing, this is what I do. Also, let me just say this. Some of you who are more seasoned, seasoned knitters, or, you knit, some people slip the first stitch and they slip the last. You just continue to do whatever you normally do. The things that I'm going to share are for newer knitters and for people that just want to understand how I do it. But I do a knit the first and last stitch. And our mentor, Miss Ann, she's an English knitter. And man, she could just go to town. She'd stick that long knitting needle under her arm, and man, she would just go. And she would always tell us, no matter how much we wanted to do things from the knit shop, she said, no, knit the first and last stitch. And that's what that's what I have done, and I continue to do. So, all right. So now listen. The 1x1 ribbing, you're going to knit a stitch and purl a stitch and knit a stitch and purl a stitch. You know how to do that. But since this is a wrong side row, that's what I'm telling you right now. The row we're getting ready to work will be row 1. So all the odd number rows will be on the wrong side of this ribbing. Does that make sense? All the even numbers will be on the right side of the fabric. But this first and last stitch is not part of the ribbing. And a lot of people would get confused when I first started showing them how I do it. And, you have your own way, but just go with me here. This first stitch is just an edge stitch. So I knit it on every row, the first and last stitch. You may slip it, so I knit that stitch. Now I bring my yarn to the front, and all the rest of these stitches, this is a wrong side row as far as I'm concerned, so I start, instead of with a purl one, instead of a knit one, I'm going to start with a purl one, then yarning back, and then knit one. Yarn in front, purl one, because it is a wrong side row, not counting that first stitch. But I started with a purl one, knit one, purl one, knit one. And I'm going to go all the way across, and you should end with a purl stitch at the very end, and then that last stitch, either knit it or slip it, however you do. So let's just do a few more, just to, the rhythm is going to get us. If you stop in the middle of something, go back a few stitches before you pick it up again and make sure. Purl, knit, purl. So I know I need to knit, then purl, yarning back and knit, purl. Take your time on this row because you do not want to mess up on your ribbing, because you'd have to pull it back. Or fix it in some kind of way. You'd have to fix it. So take your time. Like I say, if you get interrupted and you come back, just go back a few stitches and go purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl. Now I know I'm supposed to knit the next stitch, this stitch, then yarn in front, purl. All right, I am going to go across, and I will see you at the opposite end. All right, take care. This row is the first row, row 1 that we're working, so be very careful. Back in just a minute. All right, I am near the end of my row number 1, and I am coming up. Like I say, if you get sidetracked, you have to go answer the phone or take some out of the oven and you lose track of your count, just go back a few stitches and go purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, knit. I see that I am ready for a purl stitch here. So you just want to make sure this row is correct, because all the other rows will go on top of this one. So purl, now I knit and purl, and when you come to the end of this first row, purl, knit, purl. So I'm ready to knit, purl. I started with a purl, so I should be in position, knit. Now you see I'm down to the last 2 stitches. You don't count that last one, the first and last stitch, or like an edge. So I knit. Now my last stitch of the ribbing is right there, and it's a purl because that's what I started with. That's how I do it every time. Now you either knit or slip this stitch or whatever you do for your first and last stitch. And there's my row. Now, if you make a mistake and you counted and counted, said, Jay, I counted twice, but I still came out wrong, then you have to either go back to the beginning before you start pulling things out. It's simply to go back to the beginning, don't count the first stitch, and go purl. You can see the 2 stitches line up together. Purl and knit, purl, knit, purl, knit. You'd go through and just kind of look at each stitch to see if you put maybe 2 purls together, 2 knits together. You know, purl, knit, all the way. And you see that, okay, I didn't do that, so maybe you just didn't have it, maybe some way you just let a stitch fell off. Then you could back out to a knit stitch and knit into the front and back of that stitch, and then go back into your count, purl, knit, to give yourself an extra stitch. Or if you have too many, you can just knit 2 stitches together and then get back in the count, purl, knit. So don't start pulling things out, just walk yourself through. So now you see I have row number 1 of my ribbing done. This is still the wrong side because I have not turned. So now, we're going to do 10 rows. And now you can get the little counters, you can get the little clickers, but I find that new knitters or if you would, old school is not, there's nothing wrong with old school, people. Old school is where you have a little piece of paper, a little tatty, a little sheet, and you write down your rows. All right, I just did row 1, so I'm going to put a 1 there. Just like that. It just helps you. Like I said, and then once you become seasoned, or once you kind of, been able to multitask and remember, if you clicked it, a lot of times I would forget to turn or click the little clicker, and then I go back like, now what row? And a lot of new people don't know how to count their stitches yet. So, old school, pen and paper, pencil and paper, whatever. Just put your rows. This is the ribbing. I finished row 1. Lay it aside. Now, before I turn, this is the wrong side. Remember, odd number rows are on the wrong side. So I'm going to go ahead, even though this is way down here at the bottom, I'm going to go ahead and just find a place to kind of stick me a little piece of yarn. We'll move it up later, but I want to go ahead and get this on here so that you'll know. And then you just put it through just like you do fringe. You pull the little tails through. Just like that. Kind of didn't get. There you go. See? Now, that's the back of the ribbing. Alright, so You got to keep up with your rows, and you need to mark the back of the ribbing. Once we get to the stockinette, you'll know, but this is just for beginners because, like you say, you go out, you may not be able to sit and do it. You have kids or whatever, or grandbabies, and or you have to go to the doctor or something, and you may not. You come back and go, now what side am I on? Oh, Jay. So we marked it. Now, when I turn the work, now I'm on the right side, and this has to be row 2 because row 1 is the wrong side. Odd rows are the wrong side. Now, on row 2, watch. We're still in the ribbing, and we're going to rib for at least, we're going to finish row 9, which will be a wrong side, and row 10, of course, will be a right side once we do all the ribbing. All right, so here I go. This is row 2, though. So I knit my first and last stitch. So I knit that first stitch. Now, this throws people. Now I'm on the right side of the fabric, so I go knit 1, yarn in front, purl 1. See, I'm on the right side now. And then but the stitches will line up, so yarn in back. Now I'm going to knit 1. Then purl 1. And look, I'm purling right on top of a purl stitch. Then yarning back. There's a knit stitch. So the next stitch is a knit. Now I can just read my own stitches. If you took care and got them right, there's a purl, so I purl. Yarning back, there's a knit, so I knit. Purl. Sorry, my thumb's in the way. Knit. Purl. Knit. Purl. Now, a lot of patterns call for you to do the ribbing in a smaller needle. In other words, dropping down like maybe to an 8. And I did that, when I first started, and, especially after I started going to yarn shops. But it was, at my size, it was just too much. So I found it better to just stay on to start with my number 9s. Except when we do get to the sleeves, we will have to go down a needle size. But for the ribbing, I go ahead and use my same, in case you're asking, Jay, how come you don't use a number 8 on the ribbing? You could, if you're a seasoned knitter and that's how you normally do it, you go for it. But, then change back when we get to the body, to the stockinette. But for beginners, just learning and just working this one needle, this is a lot to kind of take in, and not have to worry about changing needles here and there. We'll just work on this one needle for most of the sweater, the one size, whether you're doing it in an 8 or you're doing a number 9 like I'm doing. The X sizes, 1X, 2X, 3X, and so forth. All right, so get lost, get to talk, and go back a few stitches. Knit on the front side is knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, knit. You can just read the stitches. You can just look at these stitches and you can tell exactly what's the next stitch. Okay, so now let's stop. All right, I'm going to work around, all the way around to this end. And if I started with a knit stitch on the front side, I'm going to end with the last 2 stitches will be a knit stitch. And for me, I will knit the last stitch. I knit the first and last stitch. You might slip it or whatever. But I started with a knit, so on this row, front side, I'm going to end with a knit stitch right there. And then my little edge stitch, I'm going to knit it. All right, so now we'll work back and forth. And of course, once you finish row 2, you will mark 2. Or you can do the little sticks and cross them. But for this ribbing, I like to go ahead and mark each one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we're going to work up till you have at least 9 rows. When you finish the 9th row, you should be on the right side of the fabric. And that should be row 10. So now I'm going to let you work a bit. I'm going to work off camera. Anytime you have to leave your stitches or go somewhere, have your caps available, cap your stitches, especially those that have animal, cats or something. Just go ahead and cap your stitches if you have to leave, so that when you come back, everything is in just like you left it. All right, I'm going to work off camera, and I will come back as I get near the end of row 9, which will be on the wrong side. Our numbers, wrong side. Row 10 will represent our right side, and we will start the body of the back of the sweater. The stockinette. Knit on the front, purl on the back. Easy. All right, I will see you shortly. All right, I have been working off camera, and I hope you have too. And as you can see, I'm on the wrong side, so this is row 9 of my 1x1 ribbing for the bottom of my sweater. Now let me say this, because I'm trying to keep telling myself, think of things to help, new knitters. Sorry about the outside noise. I've got to get this video done. If you feel like, Jay, I don't know, you're still new and you're kind of running out of steam doing the 1x1 ribbing. All right, if you can make it to just row 6, row 6 will be a right side. You could just wait for us there. Say, well, Jay, I did 5 rows. Now I'm on row 6 on the right side. I think I'm going to stop my ribbing there. All right. Maybe the next knitter might say, well, Jay, I can make it all the way to row 8. I've done 7 rows of my 1x1 ribbing now. Now I'm on row 8. It's a right. I can tell it's the right side because I have the wrong side marked. So you wait for us there. The rest of us are going to get to row 10. So as I come up finishing row 9, when I turn to work, I'll be on the right side and ready to work row 10. Row 10, we will start the body of the sweater. So let me just finish up my row 9 real quick. Last night we had the rain. Today, somebody's outside doing something. Woe is me. Woe is me. Oh man. All right, let's see. Can I do it? And before it gets... So now I'm just finishing up my 1x1 ribbing. And then purl the last stitch of the ribbing, but I have 1 stitch left. That's the edge stitch. I knit the first and last stitch every time. You may slip or do whatever. Voila, there is row 9. So immediately I take my little old school and I'd put 9. See that? So I have completed my 1x1 ribbing right there. And let me just say this, the reason I decided to go much larger, when I finished the sweater, one of my prototypes, everything looked nice, but the bottom looked like it was floating. The bottom, I think I did 6. I think I did 5 rows, and then number 6 would have been on the front side. Well, once I knit the whole sweater and the bulk, it's a number 4 weight yarn, it's nice and just good fluffy yarn, and all the stitching and the little cable and the little mock cable and the little lace. Well, it looked like the bottom of the sweater was not in proportion. So that's why I moved it up to 9 rows, and then row 10 we'll start the body. But now I'm giving some leeway. If you can only make it to 6, or if you can make it to 8. Your sweater will still look nice. I'm just trying to improve this whole, pattern, this design as I go, as I see fit. So once it's up, and it's in a good form that anyone can do it on down the road. So here's my row 9. You can see I finished it. Nice. There is just a 1x1 rib. I turn the work. I am immediately on row 10 if I was to continue doing that. But now row 10 is where we want to actually start the body. This is the lower bottom edge, the ribbing. Now we start the body. The body is in stockinette. This is where you're going to, new or returning knitters, this is where you're going to tweak or get the feeling of your tension. Where is my tension? Can I get my tension nice and even and smooth? Let me get back into the rhythm of knitting. And that's all it is. So here I go. I just simply start with the first stitch and I just start knitting. See, no more ribbing. We're done. But let me ask you this. How many of you remember when we did the 1-by-1 ribbing, we added 1 extra stitch? You remember that? To make it an odd number. Now, usually on the back, I'll just let that stitch ride, but I want to go ahead and show you now what to do in case we have some, eventually we will put pattern in the back of the sweater just like the front. So what I do to get rid of that 1 extra stitch and to keep my back to the original number, whatever you had, all right, I knit 2 or 3 stitches, just like that. And then I just knit 2 stitches together. Just like that. And I do it over near the edge. If you forget on this edge and you go across, try to remember when you get to this edge if you need to take 1 out. Or if for some reason there was 2 to take out, you can take 1 out on this side and 1 out on this side. But we only had 1 stitch. So I knit 3 and then I knit 2 together. Now I'm done. I'm back, should be back down to my to the original number that I have for my cast on, and now I can just knit across all these stitches. And all this does, of course, it starts the body, but we have knits and purls, so it cleans up all the stitches and make them nice and smooth. So like I say, you're gonna be able to gauge or look at your tension to see how your tension is flowing once we do a few rows. So here we go. We just knit across. You will knit all the way across, get to this last stitch. Of course, I knit the first and last stitch, turn the work. Once you turn the work, you are on the wrong side. Remember, we have it marked. I knit the first and last stitch, so I will knit this stitch, put my yarn in front, and then you're going to purl all these stitches across. Does that make sense? Let me knit let me get through this first row and then I'll come back just to check in, and then we'll talk about we need a few more measurements. Back in just a minute. Alright, so I'm coming up to, I thought I'd just go ahead and work across this row. This is the row where we are just knitting across. We are done with the ribbing, and so remember we were just knitting across this row. This is the first row of the body of the sweater. The sweater is in stockinette, knit on the front. When you turn it over like here, now I'm turning the work, there's the wrong side, purl on the back. So, I just wanted to make sure, and then I need to talk a minute to end this section and give you an assignment. I knit my first stitch, and then the yarn goes in front for me, and for you, because then we will purl all the stitches across. You can see the little purl bumps, so you know that we're on the back side, and plus we have it marked. So now we're just going to start the repetition of knit on the front, purl on the back, knit on the front, purl on the back. Let me just go a few more stitches, and then let's talk just for a minute so I can tell you what. Alright, so now you can see we're on the back side of our sweater. Alright, I turn it just so I can lay it down. Anytime you stop, go ahead and put your caps. You don't want things to drop off. Alright, now let's talk to finish, to get this section really started. We need some measurements. Now, I suggest, especially for new knitters, or, you know, coming back, getting back into the feel of knitting, find a sweater or a top that you like wearing, but it doesn't fall way down below the hips. It stops around your waist. You know, you put it on and it maybe comes a little below your waist, you know, but around your waist or a little bit in that area. And then you just take a tape measure to see how many inches from the top, from the shoulder, from the top of the shoulder down to the bottom of that particular sweater or little tank, little top, whatever it is. I suggest, instead of trying to actually do it on your body, just find a sweater or something that you like wearing that fits great. you like the length of it, it's not down over the hips or anything, and write that number down. I'd like to have, just make it an even number. Just makes easy to remember. So before I start shrinking, I used to use 20. Well, I have shrunk, so now I do good if I use 18 inches from the top of my shoulder down to the bottom length of my sweater. If I need to go over, you see I still have those 2 extra inches that I can go over in case the stitch or the pattern doesn't just stop right at 18, Sometimes we have to knit a little more to get things to end right. All right, then also using that same sweater or top or whatever, go to your underarm, go to where the side seam, that's what I want to say, go to the side seam of that sweater or top and put your tape right up under where the seam of the underarm and go to the bottom of the sweater and write that number down. That becomes your side seam, and then you have a back length. So that's 2 lengths we need in order to start working the back of this sweater. So for instance, for me, since I've shrunk, I would do the knit on the front, the stockinette, knit on the front, purl on the back, knit on the front. For my side seam, at least 10 inches. From the bottom of the sweater to where under my arm, 10 inches. If I start going, it depends on if the pattern or the stitch requires I have to go a little more, that's fine. Okay, I may have to go into 11 a little bit, but that's the number you want to try to use, or try to work around. So for me, it's 10 inches from the bottom to under my underarm seam, working with a sweater or a top. All right, that's where I want to meet you. I don't want you to go any further than that. I want you, once you reach however many inches to your underarm measurement, then stop. Stop and make sure that you are on a right side row, that you finish the wrong side. And if it goes over, like I said, if it goes over a row, that's fine. But make sure you're on a right side row, and I will meet you there. So as you can see, that is homework. Working knit on the front, purl on the back to however many inches that you've written down for your side seam. Not your back length yet. We're just getting up to the underarm. That's where I will meet you back. Don't go any further, because we're going to stop the back and then we're going to the front. We're going to start working our schematic, and that will give you even more time to check your numbers again. Just make sure you got everything correct. So I will see you back on the part 3 of this series, Simple Steps for Simple Sweaters. There's homework to be done. Take your time, do a good job, get your tension good, have an idea. I'm right-handed, and as you can see, I throw my yarn. I don't know continental style, but whatever, if you're already a seasoned knitter, whatever you do, however you knit. But knit up to the side seam under the underarm seam and stop, and then we're going to go and we will be ready to work our lace and our little faux cable, little mock cable on the front. All right, take care, enjoy yourself, breathe, have fun, go back and look at any part of the tape, the tutorial, just check as you go, make your own little notes, and eventually we will, you can lay this on your copy and make your black and white. I'll come back with that a little later. All right, until then, happy knitting. See you in just a few.